You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. Our guest today is Deborah Daniels. Most of you know who she is, one of the most accomplished leaders in our city and state's contemporary history for sure. She's done so much that, as I just told her, it wasn't the easiest thing to pare down her biography so that I could just hit the highlights, because they're all highlights, and we're going to get to them. And we are joined, as we are often joined, by Mr. Jim Shella, and I think you two know each other.
We know each other.
We've known each other for a while.
Jim, this is your chance. I know you've done this to her brother, but here's your chance. Put her on the spit.
I think, don't you advertise this by telling people that it's a comfortable environment?
Informative, entertaining, and comfortable. Yes, that's correct.
He's looking to you.
Huh? You've got a long resume. You've held important jobs in Indianapolis and Washington, D.C. What to you was the highlight?
Best job ever was U.S. attorney. And any former U.S. attorney will tell you that was the best job they ever had. It's just an opportunity. It's not only a great opportunity to practice law, but there's a chance to make a difference on a national level. So I took advantage of that opportunity.
But U.S. Attorney for Southern District of Indiana.
Right.
And how long did you serve in that role?
About 5.5 years.
And
a while ago.
But you then became a deputy attorney general?
Assistant attorney general. Yeah, there's
right.
one deputy, and then there are about 10 or 11 assistant attorneys general. And that was later in the W administration. And I was running the research, grant-making, kind of state and local law enforcement policy entity. It's an umbrella agency called the Office of Justice Programs.
But even though you were in Washington for that, you thought the local job was more important. You're the person in charge.
You think Susan Brooks would say it's the best job and Joe Hogsett?
Susan, I'm sure, would say that. Mm-hmm. It has to be better than Congress.
What's the opposite of progress? You were in Washington, D.C. during 9/11, is that correct?
And I had just moved my belongings out to my new apartment out in Washington on the weekend of September 9th of 2001. I had a meeting on that Monday. I hadn't quite been confirmed yet because Chuck Schumer had a hold on my confirmation. So I was waiting for that to be lifted, which happened immediately.
I was going to say, why? Why would you?
It had nothing to do with me.
With someone we know?
He had some issue with the attorney general that he wanted, results on. Actually, the people listed for confirmation on the day that he pulled me were Bob Mueller for FBI, Asa Hutchinson for DEA, me, and then 2 other people at a lower level. Mm-hmm. And you can just see him looking at the list saying, we can't bounce Mueller, and we better not take out the DEA guy who's a former congressman. Not this Daniels woman. So I was on hold at the time. But I was out there. I had a meeting that Monday, and then I was flying back at about 9:50 a.m. on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't obviously get out.
No flights, right?
Yeah, but I was on the plane when they figured out what was going on, kicked us off the plane, didn't tell us anything. It was pretty hairy for a while.
I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone who was in an airplane or at the airport on that day. What was it like?
For what it's worth, I was in Scotland, and there were no flights coming back.
I'm sure.
We was over there. My wife was there working. I went there to join her on vacation, and vacation was canceled.
I'm sure that's true.
So did they make the announcement on the plane about the terrorist attacks, or they just said, everyone's getting off, we're not going anywhere?
Exactly. So they told us nothing. I'm sitting there, they're getting ready to take off, and all of a sudden the flight attendant goes running up to the front of the plane. I found that odd. And then they announced that we needed to get off the plane, get out of the airport, and that was it. So were
you at National? Reagan National?
Reagan National, and if you're familiar with that northernmost concourse out of which American flies, and at the time U.S. Air, there's what I called the grassy knoll right across the driveway. So we're all standing around on the grassy knoll. We had no idea what was going on. Finally, people started finding out that there had been planes flying into buildings, and I started thinking, I'm not sure I want to be at Reagan National Airport because it could be a target. In fact, when I handed over my boarding pass to get on the plane, I looked past the gate agent and I said, "What's all that smoke behind you?" And she said, "I don't know, it looks like a Pentagon." And she didn't know. Nobody knew.
So you got on after the Pentagon had been hit.
After the Pentagon had been hit. And that's when they shut everything down, kicked us off. Thank goodness I wasn't in the air. Who knows where I would have been. But the good news was I had just moved into my apartment, which was one metro stop away, so I could walk there.
On the blue line, isn't it? The blue line goes to Washington.
The yellow.
Your brother was in the executive office building.
Yes, he was. And they evacuated them, and yeah.
How soon did you get in touch with him?
Oh, not for a while. Yeah.
The story he told when he came on the podcast about that was very interesting. He had a driver and just the chaos of it, but also the sort of, there's a calmness of, okay, it's awful now, but it'll be better. And we just got to get through these next few little bits. How much did that change your time in Washington? Or did it?
Oh, considerably. Because the things that we thought we were going to focus on, of course, changed dramatically. As job one was terrorism and what we can do about it. And so all of us were looking to what can our agency do to respond appropriately. And we had the Office for Victims of Crime, so that was very active, and a lot of the other agencies. And we were working with local law enforcement a lot, obviously, to make sure that they had resources that they needed.
One of the victims of the terrorists on that day, I want to say it's Susan Olson, but that's not it because she's the youngest. She's the youngest Brady girl on the Brady bunch. It was Ted Olson's wife.
Right.
Barbara Olson,
Barbara
correct.
Olson. She says they've made us go back into the back of the plane, which means she was in first class. They shoved her into the back. And she says, I don't know what's going on. And she was on the plane that hit the Pentagon. And he was trying to muster some response, but there was very little he could do.
What did your role become post 9/11?
Again, I had, before we created the Office of the Department of Homeland Security, I had the Office for Domestic Preparedness within my portfolio. So these are the people that train police officers on how to deal with ricin and other very dangerous materials and how to deal with anthrax and all that kind of stuff and other aspects of domestic preparedness. For the first, year and some change, we focused on that a lot. Then that went over to Homeland Security when it was created in, I would say, March of 2003. But we collaborated. I was a good friend of the former FBI agent who was brought in to run that office. And she and I tried to figure out, okay, how can we collaborate with our resources to help local law enforcement with equipment that they might need for a terrorist attack, but they can use for law enforcement purposes when there's no terrorist attack. So it was that was really almost the whole focus after that. There were a lot of other things law enforcement still needed, and they continued to remind us of that, and we tried to help them, anti-drug work and all that.
You took what was a pretty important job, and I'm guessing the gravity of it got much greater all of a sudden.
It did, and I had to keep a little bag packed in my trunk. I didn't have the situation that Mitch had, for example, where he literally had a pager, and if that pager went off, you took off. They weren't that worried about my building that was, we weren't even in the main justice building because we were a big agency, so we were off-site and people didn't know where we were. But I had a little bag packed in my trunk in the event that we all had to go to what people called the undisclosed location, but everybody knew it was at Mount Weather under the mountain.
Right.
And so I was out there many times because we We'd work out there maybe one day a week for a while just so you'd get accustomed to how you get out there and what you do when you're there.
Do you want to ask the follow-up about the anthrax mailings and all that stuff, Jim? Were you involved in that? Yeah.
I wasn't involved in the anthrax mailings, let me be clear. But yes, that happened. Of course, that happened in October. I got confirmed right away after 9/11, naturally.
Right.
Schumer became a statesman and lifted his hold. And so, sure, a month later, there's the anthrax attacks. And we were not an investigative agency, but we were prepared to do what we could. There were some false starts trying to figure out who was doing this, as you may recall.
And they never found out who did it?
I think they did eventually find out, but it's been so long, I now can't.
Wasn't the same time that there was the murder spree or whatever in Maryland?
I'll tell you
Maryland
about
area.
That was not too long after. And one of the best things I did in that particular job, I think, for future purposes was we did a lot of work with this organization called the Police Executive Research Forum, which is a very good police research agency. And after the sniper thing was over, which literally affected everybody who lived around there, putting gas in my car was a tactical exercise. I would park between the pump and the building just in case, because this was all around.
For those who don't remember, there was a sniper who was killing people at the gas pumps.
Right, gas pumps, the Home Depot parking lot, just randomly killing people. But so after that was all over, there were multiple law enforcement agencies involved because it wasn't just the feds, but also multiple communities where all this was happening. I called up the head of this research agency and I said, I would like to commission you guys to do a study of how this happened, because it was two guys in a car. It was this older guy and a young kid, as you may remember, who was in the trunk with a hole bored in the trunk, and he was shooting out of the trunk. Anybody could do this. So I said, we really need a case study on how to deal with situations like this. And they turned out a really good report that I think has been used over time.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest is Deborah Daniels. She was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana. She was the Assistant Attorney General. We've been talking about that, especially her 9/11 experience. She recently retired as the managing partner of Krieg DeVault, where she had been for several years.
Yeah, technically I stepped down from that managing partner role so that I could ratchet down. I wouldn't want to suggest to anyone that the current managing partner is not the managing partner.
I thought Mike McDaniel just ran that whole place. We are joined by Jim Shella. Jim, go ahead.
I want your perspective on what we hear in the news all the time now about the weaponization of the Department of Justice. Having worked there and been a part of it, what do you make of those claims?
They are specious. The Department of Justice is a non-political entity. The people who work there are career prosecutors who are not political. They don't do things for political reasons. And it just hurts me to my core to see people believing that prosecutions coming out of the Department of Justice are political. They are not.
And when the prosecutions are directed at Donald Trump, what do you make of that?
I would say that if a federal indictment occurs, chances are pretty high that the crime occurred, and also pretty high that a conviction will result, because in the Department of Justice, you are actually forbidden to bring a case unless you have sufficient evidence that creates a substantial likelihood of conviction. I would say, if you're talking about the current federal indictments of Donald Trump, we've seen a lot of that evidence publicly, and even what we've seen publicly is damning. And there's more where that came from.
If you don't mind, let's get back to your service as U.S. Attorney. What was your most meaningful prosecution there?
In the past, I have said, and this probably still holds, we prosecuted, and you will remember Mike Dugan.
Oh, Judge Dugan.
Yeah. Former Marion County judge.
Was a well-known, very capable judge, smart guy. People talked about him as a potential mayoral candidate in the future. And it turned out he was on the take. And it broke your heart. It was really a tragedy. The office was already involved in that investigation when I came in. It was not moving very well, so I moved it around and got somebody else on it. And it turned out that he was requiring kickbacks from people that he was appointing to the equivalent of receiverships. And
there was one in particular that involved a health insurance company.
There was an insurance company. He was going to mutualize it and then take it over and leave the bench and take over this company. And that may have been the most momentous prosecution that we engaged in this community.
Jim, did you cover that?
I did not. I was here and I was aware of what was going on and, of course, knew reporters who did cover it. But it was big news. It was big news. And there were some rather well-known people who were apparently paying some of those bribes.
Yes, there were.
And there's some great stories out of the conversations I've had with Mr. Ed Tracy and Jim Voiles about that time period. What's it like as an office when you don't play favorites and are not supposed to play favorites, but then a judge becomes the object, or a prominent person becomes the object of your investigation? Is there added pressure one way or the other?
I didn't think so. There shouldn't be. You just have to follow the evidence where it leads. I did once comment, it is easier for me as a Republican to prosecute Republicans because nobody asks any questions about that. You know, we also prosecuted a county prosecutor in the eastern part of the state.
Gerald Surface?
How did you remember that?
I have some history with Gerald Surface.
How interesting.
Spill it.
I don't want to know.
I don't think I want to tell your audience. But he was the prosecutor in Wayne County, and I became acquainted with him when he served as a special prosecutor on a license branch case in Delaware County.
Oh, how interesting. He was taking bribes.
Well, and I can tell you, he was during that Delaware County case, he was charged with prosecutorial impropriety.
What a shock!
Beat the rap.
He didn't beat ours, and was taking bribes from a defense attorney who was a friend of his. He was fixing drunk driving cases, and then it got to the point where he actually filed a death penalty against some guy that was charged with murder, but he filed the death penalty and then got the guy's lawyer to cough up the money for him to drop the death penalty. So it wasn't just drunk driving cases. It was worse than that. And then this was amusing just to show you how straight arrow the Justice Department is and how nonpartisan we are. We had investigated this guy for quite a while. And as I think of it, it wasn't the Dugan case that was going slowly. It was the Surface case. And so finally, we get to the point where we're having our news conference to announce the indictment. And I can't remember this guy's name, but he was with WTLC. Nice guy. Great big guy. You might remember.
Kevin O'Neill.
That's the guy. He says...
Now you know why Mr. Shella comes on these podcasts.
Exactly. He says, somebody's going to ask this, so let me ask it. What's the political party of this guy? And I was at a loss. I honestly did not know. And I had to turn around and ask the line AUSA, Assistant U.S. Attorney, I don't know. What party is he? And she says, well, he's a Republican. And I almost said, oh, thank God.
Dugan was a Democrat.
Dugan was a Democrat. Yeah. But it shouldn't make a difference. And it doesn't make a difference.
Let's take you back a little bit. How Hoosier is Deborah Daniels?
How Hoosier am I?
What's your favorite Hoosier?
Oh, golly. I mean, do I eat the latest fried item at the state fair? I had the fried sauerkraut one year, which sounds awful, but it was actually pretty good. And I love, of course, pork tenderloins. You got to love tenderloins or you shouldn't live here. I don't allow myself to eat that kind of thing very often. About once a year, I'll let myself have one.
Did you graduate from North Central?
I did.
And North Central has been a midwife for many Leaders and Legends podcast guests. Mitch Daniels, Mark Miles, Kip 2, God love him.
I forgot Kip went to North Central. Bart Peterson.
Bart Peterson, yes. Jeff Smolian,
Mm-hmm.
several others. North Central, was that just about when it was being built or had finished being? So many of those folks had gone to Shortridge.
I'm old, but I'm not that old. No, North Central was, I think, finished right around 1958 or something like that. I came along, of course, much later than that. Much later than that.
Were any of the folks I just mentioned in high school with you?
Mitch was. Mitch, of course, is much older than I.
2 years?
2, yes, 2. But no, I would say, Miles. So I've known Mark Miles since I was in high school because he was the little brother of a dear friend of mine that I worked with in the summers, Marcia Miles, who later married Eric Servas. So she's Marcia Servas, if you happen to know Marcia.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was either 2 or 3 years behind me.
Why do some of these folks who've known you for so long, who, by the way, all adore you and all have been telling me to have you on the podcast, do they always seem to say, I remember her when she was a cheerleader?
Golly, why would they say that? Well, because I was a cheerleader. What do you want from me? So
it was before Title IX.
That's true. We didn't have women's sports. The only thing you had was cheerleading. So of course I was a cheerleader.
Mark Miles told the story to me at the Steerin on the East Side, but also on the podcast, that you are responsible for him getting involved in politics as you pushed him to go work for your brother in the 1974 campaign where Richard Lugar eventually lost but ran against Birch Bayh. When did you start to work in politics, find it interesting?
I've never been so much a person that works in politics as a person who works in government. When I was, 20, I got a job as a summer intern in then Mayor Dick Lugar's office. And I really enjoyed government. And as it happened, when I graduated from college and I decided my parents had done their share and they had sent me to DePaul, and I thought that cost them a little. Let me put myself through law school. At that time, you could really afford the hourly rate wasn't that bad at what's now McKinney. Then I said, I'm going to put myself through school. So I was looking for a job, and I almost waited tables at the Stable Influence, but I would have been terrible at that. So thank goodness I didn't.
At the where?
Oh, see, Jim may remember the Stable Influence. It was a great little restaurant up on the north side. But anyway, the mayor's office called, and the mayor's scheduler, Ruth Ewing, this lovely lady, was retiring. She'd worked for him for years. And they said, what would you think? We heard you're looking for a job. What would you think about coming to work for us? And the pay was terrible, but the experience was tremendous because I got to know so many people that ran the city. And so this was 1973.
So was Mitch the chief of staff then, or was it still Morris?
Mitch was working
Jim Morris.
For campaign communicators over at for Keith Bulin at that time. In Lugar's last year, which was 75, Mitch came over as communications director. Jim Morris was chief of staff when I was a summer intern, but it was right before I came in that he left, and a guy named Sox Adler was chief of staff. I don't know if you'd remember him.
No, I don't remember that.
But Mike Carroll, dear Mike Carroll, was a deputy mayor. Tom Hasbrook was a deputy mayor. There's wonderful people.
I never knew Mike Carroll. I was in the Army when he was really doing a lot of his big stuff. But P.E. McAllister told me he was one of the most impressive people he had ever met. And I said, in what way? And P.E. told me, if Mike Carroll says it can be done, it can be done. I remember that as a direct quote.
I would say that's true. And at the same time, he was such a humble guy. He got things done, but without being showy or pompous. He was just a great person.
Is there such a thing as a DePaul mafia? Because Toby McClamrock says that there is. John Dillon says there is.
I would say
John Hammond says there is.
I would say that to a certain extent, even more so today than when I came out of DePaul, there is. Sure. I don't know if it rivals the Wabash Mafia, but it perhaps does.
What about, did you go to DePaul? It's interesting when I have folks on this podcast and they're talking about their college and I ask them, did you go with and you have David Frick who says, yeah, I went with Stephen Breyer, who was the Supreme Court justice when he was at Harvard Law School, and Jeff Smulyan saying, yeah, O.J. Simpson and I had a class together or stuff like that. There any folks you went to DePaul with who like we would know per se for being prominent in the city?
Not here. One of my good friends at DePaul was a guy named Jim Stewart, who has written a number of books. He used to be with the New York Times, and then he was with the Wall Street Journal, but he's written a number of books. So you'll see this James R. Stewart. And so he's not well known in this community, but I think he's known around the country.
How much would you credit your really amazing success and all these very important and prestigious jobs you've had? How much credit would you give to Denny Sutherland?
None. I say that because I assume Denny will listen to this, but it's also true. Denny and I did know each other in college. He's also much older than I am. He's a year ahead of me. And
Denny and Lacey Johnson and Fusen were all, I think, at Arlington High School together.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Denny and Fusen were good friends, and my husband worked for Rick's father, Wayne, as the associate news editor at the Indianapolis News for 30 years. And so he would visit Rick when he'd be visiting Wayne when Rick was pretty young, because Lyle's a little older. And so Denny knew Lyle because he would see him at Rick's.
I don't know if you're planning to ever run for office and need a press agent. If you do, hire Denny Sutherland, because no one thinks higher of you than Denny. He has been on me to have you on this podcast since I started the damn thing 4 years ago.
Oh, so this is his fault. Okay.
100%.
Denny's a great guy, and there's no one that he doesn't know. He's just a hail fellow met and a delightful guy. And he's also my neighbor now. I moved into his neighborhood about a year and a half ago.
Is it interesting to go back and think about who you saw when you were younger, what the city was like when you were younger? I say this a lot. I was born in 1967. I only came downtown. Sorry, ma'am. I only came downtown to watch Dick the Bruiser as a kid. We never came downtown for any other reason. And here you are growing up in the city, all these young leaders, Morris, the list goes on. And now we just had the All-Star game, which the NBA said is basically the greatest All-Star game they've ever had, and so much change in the city. How proud are you of your friends, of the people who we grew up with, and the city of Indianapolis?
Oh, extremely. You look at the 87
Pan
Am Games. But then before that, we had the National Sports Festival, which must have been, I'm not sure, that was earlier in the 80s.
Like 83, 82 or something?
But
82, I believe.
Here's Mark Miles, who was quite young at the time, who did a great job of running the Pan Am Games. It was no surprise.
Along with Ted Boehm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was no surprise when he was in charge of all these other things years later. Very talented people in this community. And as everyone tells you, other communities just don't have the spirit of volunteerism that we do. People step up here.
One of the things that's on your resume is involvement with the Lugar series, which is all about developing talent.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who may not know, I believe they select 30 young women every year. Closer to 20. And they get together one day a month and have a number of experiences to teach them about government and politics. And a number of the people who have graduated from that program have gone on to elected office. I always was impressed, not just that the Republicans had that, but that the Democrats didn't have, and they do now. They've come up with a similar program. But what has the Lugar series meant to you?
They created the Lugar series while I was U.S. attorney, and I wasn't able to participate at the beginning because I made the mistake of asking permission of the Justice Department. They said it's a political thing, so you can't do it. But as soon as I left that role, I got involved in the Lugar series because we just didn't have enough women in responsible positions in government or in politics. They weren't running for office. We still have a dearth of women in the State House. It's other than in statewide elective office where we've done real well, but the General Assembly, the percentage is pretty pitiful still. But we've been able to give these women what equates to a crash course in government and politics that would have taken them 20 years to learn otherwise, and they learn it in about 9 months. And it's just remarkable to see. Sue Ellspermann went through the series, and she then was induced to run for state rep and then eventually became lieutenant governor. And now she's doing a marvelous job running Ivy Tech.
Absolutely.
There are just a lot of people. Wendy McNamara went through the series, and she's a very important state rep. There are a lot of people who've done that.
And the Lugar series has done a really good job of reaching outside Indianapolis, reaching outside of the, quote, legal profession and some of the stereotypical ones to say, this is a dentist down in Corydon, and we want this diverse sort of audience and voice.
All ages, too. I'm on the honorary board of governors, which means I don't have to do any work except once a year when we actually have to read all the applications, score them, and then interview the finalists. And so it's a heavy lift for about a month or something like that. And we focus on outstate. We don't want it to all be Marion and Hamilton counties. and we've had people over 60 who have participated. We've had certainly people in their 20s, 1 or 2 right out of college, but usually we want them to have a little life experience before they come in.
Is it time for Indiana to have a woman governor?
I was going to answer before you got the question asked. Yes, it is. It's past time.
So I take that as a Suzanne Crouch endorsement.
I am a Suzanne Crouch supporter. Sure.
Do I have to disclose now?
Yes.
It's just a podcast, for heaven's sakes. It's not the CBS Evening
News.
News.
Who's going to listen to this anyway?
Everybody. I do the PR and speech writing for Suzanne Crouch for governor. That's why I asked that question.
Yes, come to think of it,
I have
saw
no
you
affiliation.
Yes, we want to make clear that Jim is still a good
Jim's wife, though, is a big supporter
member
of Suzanne Crouch for governor.
My wife's the Democrat.
Jim, I want to make sure that and I'm going to turn this over to you completely. We've got several minutes left with Deborah Daniels and Jim Shella. You can do this a heck of a lot better than I can.
I can't wait to hear
Mitch
what it
Daniels'
is.
run for governor and what that was like for Deborah Daniels. It's all yours, Jim.
Is that your question?
It seemed like a pretty complete question to me, but I'm guessing it's got to be a different experience to have someone in your family in a position with that sort of profile.
When he was running, I was actually still at the Justice Department and didn't come back until after he'd won. So I missed the first campaign.
You could get it on. You get some of it on YouTube.
That's okay. Somewhere I have the tapes of his RV1 tour, which is amusing. I've watched a little bit of that.
That's what I was referring to, the half-hour program that he put together.
I did
weekly.
see that.
Yeah.
Really, the worst part about it is that when someone you are close to is criticized for things that, then that's going to happen in politics. They're going to be criticized for things that are not appropriate at all, don't even bear resemblance to them, and you just have to deal with that. He was better at it than I was, naturally. But I was real proud of him when he was governor. I thought he did a great job. When he goofed up, I'd be the first to tell him, but that didn't happen very often, right?
Did you encourage him to run?
Oh, sure. I don't think he needed my encouragement, but I thought he'd make a great governor, so I was very pleased that he did.
His service as governor and his reputation, has that helped you in business?
Oh, no. Actually, I came back to the law firm, and there were so many things I couldn't do because he was the governor. I couldn't work for a state agency. I couldn't do contract work for state agencies. I was not going to be a Hillary Clinton and take people and represent them in front of state agencies. I just wouldn't do that. And actually cramped my style a little bit. But I'm sure in other ways over the years it's helped me tremendously, naturally.
But it only helps if you've got what it takes to do the job in the first place.
One hopes. When I was a kid, my mother would talk to me about what we now call networking, and she'd say, you need contacts. You need contacts out there. I'd say, Mom, I'm going to make it on merit. And then eventually I figured out that's all fine and it's incredibly important. But if nobody knows, it's if a tree falls in the forest, right? You need both.
Right.
Keep going.
One of the other things that you list on your resume is your involvement in trying to deal with the scandal at USA Gymnastics. Tell me about your role there.
When you asked me earlier what I thought was the most important job or something like that, the job was the U.S. Attorney job. Probably the most impactful thing I've done was this analysis of USA Gymnastics. When the Star first started publishing articles and I saw what was going on over there and what was starting to come out, I made almost an offhand comment to Jim Morris, in fact, that I said, they need somebody to get in there and analyze their policies and how they play out in practice and figure out how they can protect these young athletes because they ain't doing it, right?
Right.
And he said, do you know anybody who could do that? I said, well, as a matter of fact, given my background, because I had a background in the local prosecutor's office in child abuse cases, I had done a lot of those. I had supervised that division. Then over time, I had continued to do that kind of work in various capacities. And in my practice, I was doing internal investigations and that sort of thing. I said, I would love to be able to do that. And as it ended up, he mentioned it came back around and I was engaged, the firm was engaged to do this project. And after a period of 7 or 8 months, we came out with a report that, to their credit, after a couple of false starts over there, they got a great CEO in Lili Leung, who is there now and has been there since about 2019, that has methodically gone about making improvements in all these areas. Her focus is on the wellness of the athletes. You saw what happened when Simone Biles got the twisties. In the old days, they would have just said, get your butt back up there and perform. You can imagine Bella Caroli and Marta Caroli.
Yeah.
That just wouldn't happen. What they did was they came around her and they said, we're with you. You don't have to do this. You take all the time you want, and we're going to provide you with whatever resources you need. It's a completely different place now.
And then that's the second CEO that they've had since the scandal broke, correct?
Oh, I think they had 2 or 3 before Lili. You may remember they had Mary Bono for about...
Congresswoman Mary Bono.
Yeah, for about 3 days before they figured out there was some reason that wasn't going to work.
In memory of Sonny Bono, her ex-husband.
Right.
I asked this question last week. Jim and I did 2. It was 2 weeks ago. We did 2 podcasts right here, Channel 8 Studios. One of them was with Mr. Harry Gonzo, who you know, obviously.
Yes, of course.
Second one is with the mayor of Zionsville, Mr. John Stair. And the question that if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard me ask, perhaps, and the question is, who is the Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most? Both of those men answered Mitch Daniels. So here's your chance. Who is the Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most?
Now, what do you expect me to say? Actually, if I were not doing a podcast, I would say Mitch Daniels. Maybe second to Dick Lugar, because I'm a Lugar Republican from way back and learned at the knee of Lugar, as did I. And I just, so maybe I'd put Lugar first and Mitch second.
We have a few more minutes with former U.S. Attorney, former Assistant Attorney General, Deborah Daniels. Jim, you got a couple more questions before we get to the 5 questions?
I don't want to feel like I'm just running down your resume, but one of the other things you list there is your involvement in Gypsy.
The Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee.
Right, which it maybe has an unfortunate acronym. But
we don't wear bangly earrings and beat tambourines.
But that was a creation of Dick Lugar's, correct?
Actually, Gypsy was created in the John Barton era, which immediately preceded Lugar, by the business community. The bankers and the other people in the business community got together and said, we've got to help whoever's in power in the mayor's office move this city into a position of prominence, because we really were Indianapolis then. And so it was created right about 2 years before he took office, but it came to fruition in the
came
Lugar
to prominence
years.
certainly during the Lugar years and had a lot of prominence during the Hudnut years.
Yes.
Doesn't seem to so much anymore.
There are a lot of other organizations now, and some of which Gypsy spun off. Indianapolis Downtown, what we now call Downtown Indy. I have to keep up with these name changes.
Visit Indy, is it?
Visit Indy is the
different.
old
That's
Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Right. And that's different than Employee Indy.
Right. But Downtown Indy is Indianapolis Downtown Inc. previously. And so there are a lot of those organizations that Gypsy helped create that have taken over some of Gypsy's former role, which is fine.
You put all this together, it seems like you've been involved in this community at pretty much every level, it seems like. You haven't had too much involvement in education.
Other than the fact that I'm the incoming chair of the University of Indianapolis Board of Trustees. I have a big philanthropic side. I could never have just practiced law, I hate to put it that way, and not done things that I thought would better the community. Right now I'm chairing United Way, and I'm very involved in that. And I have to say that when I was talking about retirement, my husband had wanted me to retire for years. I said to him some years ago, but I have to be busy. What would I do? And he said, you have your do-gooder stuff. I thought, way to give it value. Well, thanks a lot. But he's right. And that's what I'm doing now with all of my time.
We talked a bit about people you grew up with and worked with in Indianapolis and how they became these leaders and these marvelous people. But do you get some pride when you do some of your do-gooder stuff when it comes to especially let's say the women at DePaul who've come after you? Jill Fredrickson, we grew up together. Her locker was next to mine at Howe High School. She's a phenomenal executive at ESPN. Lauren Mills. The list goes on. And how do you feel a sense to mentor them at all? Or are you just proud of them from afar?
Both. A number of times spoken to, whether it's the Lugar Series class or other groups of up-and-coming women, and I tell them that it occurred to me at some point, because I was not a person who was born self-confident, that I needed to try things I was afraid of, and that's how I ended up doing all the things I did, because the first scary thing was probably when Steve Goldsmith asked me to come and work for him and try felony cases and run the grand jury, and I thought he was nuts. But I thought, take a deep breath and do this because it's really important. And I tell people, it occurred to me after a while, if you are not at least a little terrified by the next thing you try, you are just not stretching enough. And I try to provide that kind of insight to other women. And I talk to them about, don't worry about the imposter syndrome. Everybody has it. You think somebody's going to find you out at some point that you're not everything that you're cracked up to be. And it really seems to help people. And I like being able to, something has to have come out of all these years I've lived. And so if I can pass a little bit of that on, I'm happy.
May I ask, when you worked in the prosecutor's office, did you work with Carol Johnson?
Yes.
Carol Johnson's son and I graduated from high school together. His locker was on the other side of mine from Jill Fredrickson.
He's so young. Isn't this amazing? Yes. In fact, Carol was in the sex offense and child abuse division, and I supervised her for a period of time.
Wonderful lady who passed several years ago.
She was a good trial lawyer.
Got one more, Jim?
You made it clear earlier how you feel about Donald Trump. How do you feel about the Republican Party?
I'm sad. I'm sad for the Republican Party right now. I'm hoping that someday we can get back to what we're supposed to be, the party of fiscal responsibility, law and order, peace through strength internationally, and we're not there. Some people have walked away from the party. Chuck on MSNBC sometimes commentating. He's a former U.S. attorney, FBI guy, DEA administrator, and he's an old friend. And he told me, I can't be a Republican anymore. I just walked away. And my view is somebody's got to stick around and try to help. And a lot of people aren't willing to speak out. And I figure, I'm retired. What can anybody do to me? I'm not running for office. I'll just say what I think. So I do.
But a lot of people look to your brother, whether he wants it or not, to Mitch Daniels to be that voice And in 2012, he was pretty close, I think, to running for president. It's fair to say.
I was a yes vote, by the way. For his sake, maybe I'm glad that he didn't put himself through that. But I also tell him that it's his fault that Trump became president, because he would have won in 2012 and then he would have gotten reelected in 2016 and we wouldn't be in this situation.
We'll end this part of the podcast by saying we need more Lugar Republicans. We'll just leave it at that. We come to the point in the Leaders and Legends podcast. We ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Jim, do you want to ask her or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Deborah Daniels, what was your first job?
My first job was working in the office at the Riviera Club, where we had grown up as kids swimming at the Rivi. And then, so I got my first job working in the office. I would like to have been a lifeguard, because I thought that would be really cool. And you get a good tan and you get to walk up and down, swing the whistle back and forth on your finger. And for those who don't know me, I'm not exactly a big person. And in order to become a lifeguard, the final exam was to save this huge guy who was going to jump in the deep end of the pool. And I thought, I'm not going to go out this way, trying to become a lifeguard. So I worked in the office, and that was a lot of fun.
It's the Dirty Harry line. A good man knows his limitations.
There you go. Exactly.
Number 2, what was your first concert?
The Beatles, 1964, in the State Fairgrounds Coliseum. It was great. And I was the one, if you ever see the tape, I was the one up in the audience screaming and jumping up and down.
That was you?
Right. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. I thought that was Mike McDaniel.
He was at the other show. He went to the evening show at the grandstands.
And John Gregg, did he go to the evening show? I think he asked this question when he came on the podcast.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I am loving the fact, however, I should say, to plug Leaders and Legends, that all these wonderful people, all these folks whom Deborah Daniels finds so compelling and successful and wonderful, they've all been on the podcast. So I've gotten pretty damn lucky.
I figured you were scraping the bottom of the barrel by the time you got to me. I don't. You'll have to go out of business after.
Denny Sutherland would have been on life support for the rest of forever if I hadn't got you on there. The cool thing, when Mark Miles came on the podcast, he was not at the Beatles concert.
No, he was too young, I'm sure.
But the car with the Beatles drove right down his street. He was on the front porch and watched them drive past.
I did not know that.
Number 3, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
There are a lot, but I think right now, given some of this conversation that we've had, I recently read Fever in the Heartland by Timothy Egan, and it's about the 20s rise of the Ku Klux Klan in Indiana, and this D.C. Stevenson guy that was the Grand Muck. And the fact there are so many parallels to today. They didn't create the public mood. They exploited the public mood, and that's what's going on now, which is a little terrifying.
Would you like me to send you my podcast interview with Timothy Egan?
Ooh, sure.
He was terrific.
I bet he was.
He was. And I grew up on University Avenue in Irvington. And
oh, really?
The D.C. Stevenson House and the Old Bolter House are both on University Avenue.
Right.
And are owned by families of kids with whom I went to grade school and high school. It's
Speaking
huge.
of connections, Robert knows everything.
He was a wonderful podcast guest. I'll send it to you.
Thank
the book,
you.
You're right. The book is terrific. Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
I would say any speech rendered by Winston Churchill during World War II, and particularly during the Blitz and that whole period. Maybe most prominently, we will fight them on the beaches, we will fight them in the air, we will never, ever surrender. What an inspirational guy. I just would love to have been there to see that.
Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose?
Up until about 2 weeks ago, I would have said Alexei Navalny, but that isn't going to happen. There is another Russian dissident, named Vladimir Karamurtsov or something like that. And I guess I could transfer the question to him. How do you persevere? With Navalny, it was, you knew what was going to happen to you and you came back. Love for your country is so profound. And I'd like to know more about that. But failing that, maybe the president of Ukraine. Because same thing. Volodymyr Zelensky, same idea. How do you persevere against these seemingly insurmountable odds?
In my litany of younger DePaul leaders, I left out Ms. Lacey Berkshire, who's now married to Mr. Michael Bryan. She is terrific.
There are we could list a lot of people. By the way, I do want to say that I listened to your podcast with
George Will?
So with your DePaul buddies. So
John Dillon and Toby McClamrock.
And you were talking about who else went to DePaul, and I'm waiting. And finally, toward the end, one of you brought up, didn't Deborah Daniels go to DePaul? And I thought, fine.
That was my mea culpa, I think.
So soon they forget.
See, you get in trouble name dropping like you do.
That's right.
I'm just an IPS kid, so I do what I can. You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmong Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Our guest today has been Deborah Daniels, co-host Jim Shella. Deborah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've wanted you to be interviewed for a long time, and it's very gracious of you. Happy retirement.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.